Hey guys, today I'm going to be testing a petrol car that is in a similar price bracket to the Tesla Model 3. It is the Mercedes A-Class, and this is the latest A-Class model. This specific model is the A200. I rented this from Sixt because I sold my Tesla Model 3 yesterday in Lisbon, and I rented it so that I can drive from Lisbon to Porto. And basically it's been quite an interesting drive. I drove around the highway, and later in the video I will talk about the driving experience as well. Firstly, let's start with the external appearance. It's obviously a hatchback, a compact vehicle. It is a lot smaller than the Tesla Model 3 and has a long hood because it's obviously got an engine instead of a frunk like an EV. It has been almost 2 years since I drove an internal combustion engine car, and this automatic, it drives quite differently to an EV, and on the highway I feel like it drives a lot smoother than an EV. But let's start with the external appearance. So basically what they've done with the new A-Class is that they moved the lights down. I quite like the previous A-Class's front fascia. I also haven't driven a modern Mercedes before, and I was quite impressed, to be honest. But we'll talk about the interior just now. You can see on the outside that it has a very long hood because it's a front engine. I'm not sure if it's rear wheel drive or front wheel drive. I will put that on the screen, but it is a compact hatchback, as you can see. So let's take a look at the rear. So I quite like the rear of the car. It makes it look pretty wide. It has a wide presence to it, especially the lights. Let's look at the trunk. So it is a manual trunk. You have to pull it up yourself, and basically in here it feels very plastically. It is not lined at all, and you can see that this is just raw plastic. There's two handles here to help you pull down the vehicle. There's no automatic tailgate, which makes it a lot less convenient than the Tesla Model 3. It does have through loading though, and obviously the top part is open because it's a hatchback. But otherwise, overall, there is a lot of space back here, and if you drop the seats, you should be able to store a lot of stuff. Moving on to the rear. The interiors are a bit smaller than the Tesla Model 3, but I do feel like you do get a lot of headspace. This chair is quite far back, and I can fit in here comfortably, even though it is a compact hatchback. And it is what you expect from a, I would say, luxury German vehicle. The interiors do feel a lot more plush than the Tesla Model 3, but in some ways I feel like it also feels a bit cheap. So this is like really cheap feeling plastic, a bit creaky as well, but they do line this with leather or pleather, whatever this is. This is also cheap plastic, not soft to the touch, very hard to the touch. They do have nice stitching on the chairs, and I'm not sure if this material is genuine leather or they opted for pleather, as most of the car manufacturers are going with. But you can see that this is a upholstery or material upholstery with either real genuine leather or pleather, and this is pretty standard in what I would expect from a German car. In terms of the interior design, I think, you know, this is very much the latest Mercedes design. At the end of the day, it really comes down to your taste. There is a long screen, and I'll go over to the front to show you guys in a minute, but you can see some parts I do feel that Tesla is doing a better job. For example, this looks a lot cheaper than having that flap that Tesla has, and over here there's obviously no rear screen, and this also feels a lot very plasticky as well. It does look like the chair seems a bit wider than Tesla Model 3, which is probably why it does feel a lot more comfortable to sit in there for longer periods. More on that later. But anyways, let's move on to the front. Moving on to the front passenger seat. Okay, so you can see that this is metal, so it feels a lot better than the Tesla Model 3 being plastic. This model doesn't have electric adjustable seats, so everything's manual. So from that perspective, it is a point to the Tesla Model 3, because the Tesla Model 3 comes with electric seats, and that makes adjustment a lot easier as well, and also allows you to save your profile for the driver, and the seat moves out the way to allow for easy entry and exit. With that being said, this does come with seat heating at 3 levels, and I tried it out and it was pretty good. There is no ventilation like the Model 3, so you don't get cooled seats as well. But looking at the front here, there are a few knobs and buttons everywhere. Let me just turn on the car, and basically you can see that this long screen is actually 2 separate displays, and one displays over there and one displays over here, and it is quite interesting how you interact with it. This part is a touch screen, this part is not a touch screen, and actually it's pretty responsive. I was quite surprised at how good it was actually. It is a lot smaller, so you can see that the Tesla Model 3 screen is probably these two stacked and even more. So if you want a big screen and more tech-centered car, then nothing really beats a Tesla Model 3, to be honest. In terms of technology for a regular car, I think this is actually sufficient and works pretty well. Actually, I actually used the navigation yesterday to drive from Lisbon to Porto. The one downside is that this doesn't have the speed traps. Tesla has the speed traps, even the average speed, and even shows you the average speed that you're doing and when the average speed zone is going to end. So big up to Tesla for that. They only released that kind of halfway through my ownership of the Model 3. So that's another testament to the technology, because with these type of cars, the technology that kind of stays the same for the life of the vehicle, whereas the Tesla keeps improving. So that's something that you get from Tesla that you don't really get from many other vehicle manufacturers. And if you look here, they have the center console. This space I would assume is designed to put your smartphone, but I've got the Max iPhone and it doesn't really fit, so it kind of sticks out like this. If you have the regular iPhone, I think it fits perfectly. Moving on to the center console, I quite like this design where it's split, so if you wanted to open it on one side, it allows you to do that. There are two USB-C ports in here, and the space isn't a lot. Obviously there is an axle under here, I would assume, and basically you can't really fit much stuff down here. Maybe obviously when you're charging your phone you can put it down there. And I really do not like this material because it gets scratched very easily. You can see it's a bit hazy already, and there is this kind of push drawer, and it feels a lot cheaper than the Model 3 one. As you can see, it's a bit jerky. There's a 2-stop section, so you can stop it here just for your drinks, and there's an interesting thing here where you press the button and then these actually hold your drinks in place. If you want smaller drinks, you clip it in place. I can clip one, clip the other, and then if I open it more, there's another USB-C port over there, and my phone actually does fit over there, but it's pretty difficult to get it in and out if you have your phone over there. Moving on to the glove compartment. Usually the glove compartments of other vehicles are a lot bigger than the Model 3. This is not surprising. The Model 3 has a really small glove compartment, and this one is bigger than the Model 3 for sure. But in terms of design, it really comes down to your personal taste. You know, some people like the minimalist look. I do think the minimalist look lasts a bit longer. It doesn't age as easily. Whereas with these, you know, if this kind of goes out of style, then it does start looking really old, and obviously everything's really plasticky. This fake carbon fiber soft material looks nice, but when you touch it, it's like kind of weird because carbon fiber is supposed to be hard, right? And this part is actually quite nice. This is soft to the touch, unlike this. This is also soft, but it's not as soft as this. And these shiny plastic parts, you know, if I got this kind of car, I would definitely get this PPF because the scratches very easily. And we'll move on to the driver's side, and I'll show you guys what's it like to be in the cockpit of the vehicle. One small thing before I move over to the other side, they have physical controls for the climate control, but if you didn't know this, when you press these buttons, it shows the status over here. Right now the car is off, so the AC is off. Another downside for internal combustion engine cars, because they don't have the AC running when the engine is off. Unlike an EV, you can have that running while the engine is not running. So let me move over to the driver's side and I'll show you guys what's unique and interesting about this car. And I found the steering wheel kind of interesting. Whether it's good or bad, you guys let me know in the comments below. So moving on to the driver's side, let me move my seat back a bit so I can show you guys everything. So you can see that everything's manual. So I have to kind of find the lever. So sitting in the driver's seat, it is quite a comfortable driving position. And if you look at the steering wheel, it is a big steering wheel, much bigger than the diameter of the Tesla Model 3 and the Model Y, or the Teslas in general. And also the other thing to note is that it is a bit thinner, so it's not as thick. I quite like thick, hefty wheels. This size is what I was kind of used to before I got the Tesla Model 3, but I'm used to a smaller wheel now. It's kind of interesting because this car is smaller, but it has a bigger wheel. Kind of feels a bit weird. I mean, maybe that's just me. But let me start the engine so I can actually turn the steering wheel. If you're sitting in the driver's seat, you can actually control both screens. And how this is done is with these touch capacitive buttons on the steering wheel. So you can see that there's a 4-way indication over here and over here. And this is specifically for this screen. And basically I can move across by scrolling my hands on this touchpad, which I find kind of like a bit distracting and not as intuitive to use. So I can go across, let's just say I want to go into the meet, I want to go to another screen, I can go like this, and I want to go to navigation. I go there and then I press the button down and it presses the OK button. And I don't want to set my home address because it's not my vehicle. But yeah, I can go through all the screens like this. I don't think this is actually very practical for driving. It's actually easier to just do this while you're driving. So you can go, let's say, the vehicle information, engine. And if you want to control this display, you just do the same, but with this scroll wheel. But this one you can't actually touch. So you have to use this. So it's basically mirrored. As you can see, home over here takes you home over there. Home over here takes you home to select your screen. What's nice is you can kind of choose what type of display you want. Yesterday when I was driving, I had the navigation over here, and then I had, like media over here. So I have media playing, and then my navigation display. I don't need to show the revs or whatever. I'm not racing. So basically, this is a cool setup that you can select if you want to have best of both. So what's interesting when I was going through this is that there's an assistance option which makes it look like the Tesla, and then it shows you if you're like veering off the side of the road or something, or outside of the lane. But what I found really interesting is that there's a service mode, so you can see the service of the car. It's almost as if like this car needs to be serviced very frequently, and you need to see this information quite frequently, because I would imagine that this information is more suited to be shown over there instead of having it as a dedicated screen behind the driver's instrument cluster. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. This car does have cruise control. I don't think it has active cruise control, so it doesn't slow down when there's a car in front of you, because I basically tested it yesterday and it didn't slow down, and I got closer and closer to the vehicle in front, even though it was showing the forward collision warning, which I found very interesting. So basically you can press these buttons to answer phone calls and stuff. I find this very dated because a lot of cars had this and you couldn't even connect your phone back then, and they had these buttons for no reason. But basically this is kind of how the MBUX Mercedes-Benz user experience looks when you have it enabled. What else is unique? Obviously you have the paddle shifters, because this is a gearboxed engine vehicle, as well as stalks. So this stalk is to control the windscreen wipers, and you can press this button to windscreen wipe once, and also to control the lights, as well as the rear windscreen wiper as well. In terms of quality, I think the stalk feels very hollow and loose and empty. Some people have kind of complained that the new Model Y, they reintroduced the left stalk for indication, and it feels kind of like cheap. But I actually think it's better than this. I mean, this feels hollow. The Model Y doesn't feel hollow. It actually feels a bit more solid than this. And this stalk is actually your PRND to park, reverse, neutral, and drive, which is similar to the old Teslas where they had the stalk on the right side over here to shift. But basically, that's kind of the driving experience. You have the window controls over here, as well as the mirror controls, and you can unlock and lock the vehicle by pressing these buttons here. Unfortunately, it's not mirrored over there, so only the driver can unlock and lock the whole vehicle. I really don't like this type of design, because that means that if someone is in the car by themselves in the passenger seat and they want to lock the car, they have to reach over to lock the car over here, which I find very inconvenient. This was the same as my BMW X3, but in some models they actually have it mirrored on the other side as well, so the passenger has the same buttons, which I find makes a lot more sense. But I think this type of vehicle is like a budget vehicle, even though it's the same price as the Tesla Model 3. They kind of cut costs by only having it on one side rather than the other. And also maybe these cars are usually driven by one person instead of having a lot of passengers all the time. So that is basically the cockpit of the Mercedes-Benz A-Class, specifically A200, and we'll go for a quick drive again, and then I'll also include the footage that I took yesterday on the highway, and I'll give you guys my final thoughts. Just get going, scroll down for drive, and it releases the parking brake, which is over here. And basically, one thing that I've noticed about driving this car, and I think it's also obviously got to do with me driving EVs for a long time. I did drive a Audi Q2 in Barcelona the other day, and that was also for a short period, but I must say this car is much better than the Q2. I prefer it way over the Q2. I do think the Q2 is based on a smaller platform than this because it is based on the A1, whereas this is kind of more closer to the A3 size. So maybe it is a bit unfair to compare the two. But I have noticed that with fuel cars, obviously there is no, how can I say, brake regen. So if I let go of the brake accelerator, it just keeps rolling and it is very smooth. Especially on the highway, this is quite useful because you're able to cruise at higher speeds, and this car I think has 7 or 8 gears, so it does cruise quite nicely at high speeds. Whereas with an EV, if you're cruising at high speeds, what tends to happen is that it almost feels like the car wants to slow down and you have to keep your foot on the accelerator quite a lot just to keep it at a higher speed and not make it feel like there's this urge for it to slow down all the time. I do think that Porsche has done a good job with that because obviously they've introduced 2 gears in the Taycan, I think the Macan as well. So basically high speeds, it switches over to a high gear and the vehicle kind of cruises a lot more easily than having it on 1 gear with the motor trying to slow down the whole time. But anyways, we are heading to the gas station and this car is actually pretty responsive. I mean, even though it's got only I'll put it on the screen, I'm not sure what the specs of the engine are, but it does feel like there's very little turbo lag compared to the Q2 that I drove the other day. The Q2 was actually a diesel, and I would expect the diesel to have more power, but this feels like it has a lot more power than that diesel engine that I drove in the Audi Q2. So we're heading through to the gas station so I can refill before returning the car at Sixt. But this car has actually been really nice to drive. It's been quite smooth and comfortable. I don't know if I should be attributing the smoothness and the comfort of the ride to the really small rims. I think 16-inch rims, I would say, with massive tires. So that obviously makes it quite smooth. But the handling is also pretty good. It's really sharp. It does feel, the suspension does feel a little bit softer than the Model 3, which makes it a lot more comfortable. And there does seem to be a little bit more body roll than the Model 3. I'm not sure if it is significantly more, but it is really well adapted, so it doesn't feel like you don't have any confidence in the suspension at all. And this car actually felt like I had a lot more confidence driving this on the highway at high speeds compared to the Model 3. To be honest, I think the handling is better, as well as maybe because it's a engine car with gears instead of an EV that has no gears. So I'm curious to try the German EVs because I haven't actually driven any of the German EVs besides the Macan. When I say German EVs, I mean the Mercedes and the BMW, to compare what that feels like compared to the internal combustion engine cars. I must say though, from my driving on the highway, it does feel like these cars, in German cars in general, are probably tuned to driving well on the autobahn, because the speeds that I was driving, I didn't even notice I was driving so fast and the car is so smooth. You know, like you can drive up to 200 kilometers per hour and it actually feels a lot more confidence inspiring than the Model 3 at, I would say, 150 kilometers an hour. So I think these German cars are spec to drive very nicely on the highway because of their highway design in Germany, with the autobahn being unlimited speed, whereas the Model 3, or this is why I'm saying I need to find out, because I need to compare it with an EV Mercedes or BMW, feels more tailored to slower speeds and more city driving. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I've actually quite enjoyed driving this car. You can hear that if I floor it, there's a lot of sound, but not a lot of torque compared to an EV, because the EV is basically silent but violent, so you get the immediate punch into the back of your seat. Obviously, if you get the A45, you'll get a lot more torque, probably much more instantaneous than this, and you'll probably also be spending a lot more money as well. So based on what I saw online, I think the A45 is almost 100,000 euros here in Portugal, and for that price you can get my Model 3 and my Model Y launch edition. So I think it's not really worth it. I do think that these German cars are definitely luxury vehicles in terms of the fact that they are charging real luxury prices where people are not as discerning or not as how can I say, not as picky in terms of features or value for money. Because if you look at the features of this car compared to the Model 3, I would say that this falls short in most regards, but people are still buying this over the Model 3. The other thing I want to say is, you know, this really comes down to EV versus internal combustion engine. Yesterday when I drove from Lisbon to Porto, obviously I think in my Model 3, if I had to drive from Lisbon to Porto, which is about 350 kilometers, I could do it in one trip without stopping, but I'll have to drive a little bit slowly. If I drive at highway speeds and plus, I definitely have to stop, and that stop is another 30 minutes plus added to your trip. And yesterday I drove this for 3 hours straight home from Lisbon, and I didn't stop at all, so that was a big time saver. In terms of cost though, if I was charging at Tesla superchargers and charging at home, it does end up much cheaper to drive a Tesla than driving this fuel car, because this fuel car I'm going to fill up now, and at Gulp, the petrol station, it is 176 euros per liter. So you guys figure that out yourself, but as far as I remember, it's more than triple the price. If you compare to driving at home, like charging at home, it's more like 10 times the price per kilometer. So that's really a EV versus internal combustion engine discussion. In terms of whether I've liked this car overall, I really did like it, but for the price, I definitely wouldn't have chosen this, because at the end of the day, the Model 3 is a lot more practical. I think the Model 3 is a bit cooler, to be honest. I think when you buy an A-Class, it's like you're buying the cheapest Mercedes and you're paying the same price as something that's like a futuristic kind of tech vehicle. So in terms of that, overall my impressions are, I would buy this car if I wanted a small compact vehicle. I haven't driven the new 1 Series, but I would be interested to compare that as well. But I am impressed. I think I've never driven a modern Mercedes, and I do think that they've definitely stepped up. So if you guys like this content, remember to like and subscribe, and let me know what you think in the comments below if you want to see more of these type of reviews. Okay, so we have arrived at the gas station, and I don't really do this very often these days, because when I got my EV, obviously you don't need to do this. So let me just check. So there's Euro Super 95, I think that's the one, and oh, it turns out that it's on this side. So it says I must put 95. What is this? E85, E5, E10. I have no idea what that means. So I'm gonna put that over there, and oh, E5 is over here. So do I need to initiate payment first? I think I need to initiate payment, and I will start filling up the car, and I'll give you my final thoughts of this vehicle overall, because that is my experience of one day with the Mercedes-Benz A-Class A200 gasoline. I authorized my card to be used at the gas station. I had to pull this out. Well, this is very inconvenient compared to charging at the Tesla superchargers. I actually need to use both hands because I can't seem to pull this out myself. Okay, so put this in here, and I am now filling up now. So push this button down, and as you can see, it's obviously a lot faster. Also, your money goes down a lot faster as well. I just need to fill until it's basically full to return at the rental car station. Wow, that's already 30 euros. €40. Okay, so it clicked. I'll add a little bit more, but it seems like that's full. Okay, so that came to about 44 euros, which is very expensive compared to how much I would pay to drive my Tesla. Even if I paid for supercharging, I think it will be less than half of that. So my final thoughts of this car, basically, I don't think I would buy this, as I said, if I had to choose between this and the Tesla Model 3. But if you like this type of content, remember to like and subscribe, and let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you like this, want me to review more vehicles like this, let me know as well, and we'll see you guys in the next video.